Hi, I'm Yummy Chips. I'm gonna make a World 15 guide. I know that oil caps came out recently, today technically, and then I know there's a lot of guides out there already. I'm just making another guide. You should definitely use a lot of different resources. You should check out a lot of different guides. Don't just look at this one. But I'm gonna do my best to help you out. I'm gonna explain some comps, explain what I used, explain some gear. Well, it's not gonna be too detailed, too comprehensive, but we're gonna go over as much as we can. I've been drinking. It's gonna be fun. It's gonna be fun. All right, we're gonna get ready. Get ready. So, I don't know. I went to this page, but anyways, let's explain the general mechanics of World 15. Right? There's a lot of enemy planes. Okay, there's a lot. It's basically War 13 on steroids with additional mechanics, right? So the key thing is enemy support planes. Their carrier node that you'll see on the map. The tutorial is going to tell you when you do the stage the first time. Those carrier nodes basically spawn additional planes in battle of anything you fight, right? So you usually want to take them out ASAP, okay? Make sure you use circle formation. A lot of people forget. I forgot a few times when I was bouncing between my emulator and my phone. People forget it. But if you don't have circle formation, you're gonna notice it real quick. You're probably gonna sink real quick. A couple key notes is chapter 15.3 and 15.4. They have subs, right? So that's like the kicker between chapter 13 and 15 is there are subs in the last two stages. Not only that, 15.3 and 15.4 have multi-boss nodes. We're going to cover that later on when I talk about the boss section. But 15.3 has, you have to fight the boss twice, and 15.4, there's 3 boss nodes with 2 different types of battles. And we're going to get to it. Okay, so a few things you should understand about how War 15 works. You got to balance your AA, your ASW when you hit 15.3, 15.4, and dealing with suicide boats. Suicide boats are going to be really, really annoying and very, very powerful. There are large, bigger boats that will slowly creep to your backline. If you don't have enough damage to kill them, or your timing for your main fleet isn't matching up with it, they will do anywhere from like 20 to 50% of your backline's HP. So you have to balance how much damage you have amongst your entire fleet. And how many ships you're willing to commit to AA carries, how many ships you're committing to ASW, and how strong your backline is for those intervals. Those are like the 3 key things in order to make your fleet successful. We're going to be talking about a lot of different compositions. Well, not really compositions, but like waifu versus meta, right? I understand people have a range of accounts, right? Not everybody has like everything in the game. And some people don't have every piece of gear. And some people don't have, crazy cats or really good fleet tech, right? So it's easier to do the stage, obviously, if you have everything. War 15 is very flexible to do. You can use a lot of ships. The better your gear, your fleet tech, and your cats, well, fleet tech and cats not as important, but your gear, your accessibility to a lot of different types of gear that are important, and also being plus 13, is going to allow you more flexibility to use more comps, right? Like, so if you want the faction fleet, it'd be a lot easier to do it when you have really good cats, fleet tech, and gear. If you don't, faction fleeting will be very, very hard. If you have your favorite waifu you want to use, if they don't bring a lot to a table in terms of, AA, surface damage, ASW, you're going to have to cover your weaknesses. So that's why Chapter 15 is pretty unique, where it's technically very, very flexible. A lot more flexible than War 14, especially on release. But that's like covering the general basics and the idea of learning to balance your composition out in order to be successful in War 15. All right, so I'm going to show you a comp that I'm currently using right now to auto farm, but we're gonna go over stuff. The comp I'm using, we're gonna start with the boss fleet. So as you can see, it looks pretty good. It is not the best boss fleet. It's not pure optimal. We can talk about some other options you can have, right? Like generally you do kind of want like a strong BB flagship. You can have a strong CV because for the boss nodes are technically a bit easier because you'll just socket in some of your stronger ships, right? The gearing is a little bit more important for this part, but there's a lot of flexibility. As long as you're using decently powerful ships, you shouldn't have too much of a problem with the boss node, right? Like, so for the flagship itself, you don't necessarily have to use Kirsex. She's really great, but you can use basically like almost any other URBB, right? Abisko and New Jersey are like options you can take. If you have a third carrier you want to bring, maybe Enterprise, you'll, depending on your gear, you'll have different levels of success, but it is flexible to pick your flagship. Your side ships, you do kind of want one strong carrier, at least one really strong carrier. You know, Yorktown 2 is generally a very strong pick. You want to bring a lot of fighters generally to War 15, so Implacable is even a decent pick. You can really stretch it if you have to. You can bring Illustrious, but we're going to comment about Illustrious later on, but I'm just mentioning that you do want to bring strong carriers, generally ones with good fighters as well, or double fighter slots. If they don't have double fighter slots, then you'll have to figure out if you want to bring a strong carrier that has traditional loadout or a strong carrier that might have a different type of plane set loadout, right? And then your third one, you generally want to bring something supportive. You could bring damage, but if you do bring damage, you're probably going to want to bring a carrier just so it can help assist in dealing damage and trying to end the fight sooner. But most people I've noticed have opted to bring some sort of support. I have Aquila used. Some people use Voga, which is a high damage and has a little bit of healing. And like I said, some people have used Lusty to help with Augment in order to help with the healing. Because depending some of the fights and where your gear loadout is at, how powerful it is, the fights may be extended or shortened, and you might have to wait for an additional cycle of main fleet attacks to kill the boss. For your Vanguard, it's pretty straightforward. Anchorage is a very easily accessible ship. She's very tanky. She provides a lot of tankiness for your fleet, or for your Vanguard, sorry. You can replace her with another strong, reliable tank. You could use a CB, right? You may have a little bit more issue of survivability, which means you might have to bring a stronger support carrier in the backline, potentially a healer. I've seen some comps and people do that, where they actually brought a healer to their boss fleet to do when they weren't using Anchorage. So, like I said, there's flexibility. For the other two ships, this might be a bit controversial, but it doesn't matter too heavily as long as they're good ships. They're kind of just additional fills. You do want to obviously bring stuff that has, strong damage, strong utility, or even a strong supportive skill. The ASW mechanic and AA is not too severe, but if you have to and you're running issues from ASW or AA, you could opt to bring something that can help you handle that for your boss fleet as well. A DD or CO if you need to. But overall, the other two slots are not super crazy important min-maxy. As long as you're bringing strong stuff to help fill in. The key is having a really good tank. If worst comes to worst, your two other ships will sink and your tank will still be alive for you to finish the fight, right? A clear is a clear. Okay, now we're going to go over mob fleet. So mob fleeting is quite a bit more important because of the carrier mechanic and because of how many fights you're going to have to do. In 15.3, you're going to have to potentially rotate your fleets. We'll get more into that when we get to the boss section. But usually, same thing, we're going to start with the Vanguard this time. You want a strong tank, right? I'm using Bress because she's basically like an off healer in a sense, but you don't have to use Bress. You can definitely use Anchorage here as well. There are a lot of people who are using that, or generally you do still want to stick with CB. If you do stick with CB, you do want to control your healing and make sure you have ample AA to cover destroying enemy planes so they don't take too much damage. Bress just has that additional healing, and the HE for one of the boss fights that you will be dealing with. That's why she's kind of really good, but there are other options. But you do want to generally stick with CBs or ships that have some sort of tanking capability. For your other two ships, right, you're going to need an ASW carry for 15.3 and 15.4. You don't necessarily need it for the first chapter 15.1 and 15.2, but you will need it for 15.3 and 15.4. I was using Sandy earlier, so this comp was not the original comp I used, but I was using Sandy. Sandy's a really great ship. She has decent ASW. You can give her the Hedgehog. She will probably need an additional CO or DD to help support her in killing the subs, or the backline to have ASW planes. Sandy's just a really great pick. You could opt to bring Cheshire, but then it's a bit trickier. Those are just some ship examples. If you can keep a Suzu alive, you can theoretically take her too. But those are just a mix of like ASW anti-air, and that's where we're going to lead to is you need an anti-air carry, which is why Sandy is a good pick because she kind of fills both roles. You just need a bit of assistance to do whatever you're lacking in. And Guam right now in this composition is kind of the AA carry and an off tank. You could use a variation of off tanks. You can also bring something with strong damage dealing, like a Noshiro can RNG tank against enemy shelling. She can also bring really great torpedo damage. This is just an example. So there is like a lot of range of what you can bring, but the key thing is addressing the ASW carry and the anti-air carry. There are like ships like Sandy who can kind of perform both decently well. There's Shinmanto, who's a really great ship that can bring additional AA and AA carry. There's things like Sayla as well. So for anti-air, there are like specific ships you can just use to bring, and then you just have to cover the ASW afterwards, or focus on ASW then cover the anti-air afterwards, because there are other ships like Hammond too who can kind of like fit in between. Now we're gonna move to main fleet, so we'll start with the healer Unicorn. I highly recommend using her. I think basically everybody used her. She's just really good. She has a few fighters she brings. She deals moderate damage. She has a preload. She's a really great hero. She's like one of the best performing healers and has like decent amount of damage. It is highly recommended you bring her. If you don't want to bring her for some reason, you definitely want to bring some sort of CVO healer. You're gonna need it. And then you have your other ship. You do want a second carrier. You could opt to make it a battleship, but you're gonna have issues with AA coverage. So if your Vanguard has amazing AA coverage, you could opt to bring 2 BBs, right? We'll talk about flagship in a second. But your other ship, I used 2 healers. I used Unicorn and Perseus. You don't necessarily have to. You can use Unicorn, Ryuho, Unicorn, Voga for more damage. Ryuho's for more direct healing. You can even go Unicorn, Perseus like what I did, which is just insane healing, right? Unfortunately, there's a weakness to it, and I'll explain it later. And you do want like additional support. You can mix it up between a support or a damage. It just kind of comes out to how your comp is played. You're gonna probably have to test around based off of what gear you have and what ships you're using in your Vanguard. You have to fiddle with it a little bit, but that's the general idea. Your flagship, now making it a BB does make it easier to deal with a lot of different enemy nodes, but you can opt to not do that. You could bring 3 CVLs. All of them have extra anti-air guns. The caveat is you can't really fight BB nodes, right? You could bring 1 CVL and bring 2 CVs, right? The caveat is that you don't have any ASW support with ASW planes for your Vanguard, so you have to ensure your Vanguard has enough ASW to deal with it, or you can just bring double BB, but then now you have to worry about enemy carrier nodes. So that's kind of like the situation with there, but you can decide how you want to do it. I think most people did 2 carriers, 1 BB. A lot of people did 1 CVL, 1 CV, 1 BB, having a balanced mix. But when you have a balanced mix like that, you generally need really good gear to support you to help you push through. We're going to cover more about the nodes down the road, but that's kind of like how it goes. Actually, no, we're going to cover... Yeah, we'll cover the nodes later. So, we're going to keep on going. Now, submarine comps. I don't have any submarines currently equipped, and this is going to be another controversial take. Subs, they're useful, and you're going to be using them. They're going to make things easier, but they're not like insanely important. There is sub min-maxing, but I didn't sub min-max. I just used 3 USS subs, and it was fine. As long as you have SSR subs, then it's gonna make it a whole lot easier. You can even opt to use U522 or Leonardo in order to get the open ocean support skill that help you save oil to move them around, and it'd be fine. Like as long as they're 125, you're gonna be fine. And they have plus 10 gear, that's gold, magnetic. it's going to be fine to use. They're just helping you to soften some of the, specifically the threat 3 nodes. They're going to help you soften up the first couple waves so you can clear the node without taking too much damage. That's kind of what the main key they're using, and obviously for the boss nodes as well. You wouldn't really want to just spam them unnecessarily. Like, you should be able to take out threat 1 and threat 2 decently well, depending on like I said earlier with the compositions. If your composition is more designed to tackle BB nodes and DD nodes and not really carrier nodes, then you would use your subs on the carrier nodes, and vice versa. Like, continue on with each set. Usually you can tackle 2 of the nodes like very easily by optimizing your comp to do so, and then you use the subs to deal with that 3rd node that you're having trouble with. Okay. So we're moving on to that. Now it's about support carriers. So support carriers is a new feature for War 15. Just like the enemies, like I mentioned earlier, have support carriers, so do we. So you see, actually this is a bad location to show. Let me go to main campaign. So when you go here, you'll see this slot, support carriers. So the key thing about support carriers is that only their fighters help you. They're basically additional fighter triggers that help you intercept enemy planes. So from that, you want to bring ships with really good fighters. Like the best examples are Illustrious, which is what I was saying, mentioning later. Illustrious Muse, and Placeable and Yorktown 2s. If you're going to use Placeable Yorktown 2s in your main fleet and your main fleet or your mob fleet or your boss fleet, and not be able to use them as support carriers, then you can still opt for Centaur, Albion. Those are try to look for the ships with at least 5 fighter planes. 4 if you really need to stretch it. You might have to check the wiki to figure out how many planes there are, or go in and count the limit breaks yourself. But yeah, that's generally how it works. You do aviation stat is very important. AA is not as important, but the aviation stat is important, so you're going to want to give them really good gear. We're going to cover the gear actually right now. We're going to lead into the gear. But for support carriers specifically, you're going to want to use this one gear. It's in the gear lab. Let me just find it real quick. These things. So these prototype FW190A5s, these are really good. They're very cheap, and they're really, really good. You have to do OpSci, unfortunately. I understand a lot of people don't like doing OpSci, but just do it to collect these. You only need about 6. And then you only have to plus 10 them. You don't have to plus 11 them, and they're really good. You'll want to put these on all of your support carriers, and they're going to do a lot of work. This is kind of why War 15 is a lot more accessible, because as long as your support carriers have very strong fighters, they're gonna do wonders. Now, these don't have bombs because support carriers, I forgot to mention, they do no surface damage. And because they don't do surface damage, you can run planes that have no surface damage. Another option is using the Pancake, which is the Flapjacks, which are really, really good planes too. We're going to cover those in a little bit. Another option is to use Hellcats and things like that, but you'd have to check the wiki. Airburst DPS is kind of like what you want to look at, and these have a really good airburst DPS. The Flapjacks technically can be better because they fly slower and they stay on the map longer, but they cost a lot more material, and you'd have to craft quite a few, 6 extra ones in order to min-max it. So you don't necessarily have to do it, because it's not like it's a make-or-break situation. These are just going to be completely fine, so they're highly recommended. You should definitely craft these and use them. And if you're still trying to push the content and you don't have the mats, like, you can opt to use Hellcats, if anything, right? Or any other high burst AA plane in order to cover it for temporarily until you can get the mats to get it. Now we're gonna go look at the plane gear. So we're gonna start with the fighters, right? We're gonna start with the fighters because fighters are basically the most important. So the Flapjacks, like I mentioned earlier, god dang it, I forgot to remove sound layers. I'm so sorry. So the Flapjacks are your go-to. Like, you're gonna want to craft these. These are really, really good. Like I already mentioned, they fly slower, they do great AA damage, and they're going to be able to cover a lot of your AA problems when the carrier's using it. You can use Hellcats because you probably already have them from doing War 13. You can always use them as an option as well. They're not as good, but they're definitely pretty, like, still usable, still usable. You don't have to plus 13 the flapjacks. Plus 10s are completely fine. If you really want to, you can to like get a bit more min max out of it to lighten the load on your Vanguard ships, so you can use more damage oriented ships. You could if you want to, but it's not necessary. Now, when we look at torpedo bombers, if you can, you want to try and use the Wyverns. If not, you want to use the Brigettes. The Brigettes is I gotta find it. Where is it? It's the Iris plane. So the reason why is they have intercept. And all fighters, they intercept enemy planes. So that means whenever your planes or your carriers begin to intercept enemy planes, these will also go out at the same time as your fighters, and they'll help you deal more anti-air damage while still producing their own damage, right? If you don't have either of those, there's not much else you can do. You're gonna probably just have to use parallel torps, maybe a mix of parallel and aim, depending on like if you're fighting a boss node, or if it works a bit easier for you to take down some of the BB nodes with bigger HP backlines that are medium/heavy armor. But that's just like kind of like the line. Wyvern Brigettes, then Parallels. Dive Bombers, it's basically what we already know. You're using the Tenerai. If not, you're using a Gold Curtis at plus 13. If it's not plus 13, you're using the Purple Hair Divers. It's what everybody uses. Guys, stop. I forgot to mute sound alert. Okay, look, I'm a scuff streamer, but I forgot to mention that for your support carriers, those planes, if you can, after you equip the wolves, right? For the other slots, if you can equip the highest rarity plane, you can, because they give more aviation, which helps you with dealing more damage from those support fighters that get sent out in battle. If you don't have UR, obviously, or spare UR to equip, try to do SSR. If you don't have enough spare SSRs, just stick with, elites, if that's what you have to do. Okay, so now, we're going to talk about, like, the CBs and CAs. So, their guns, you're generally going to use AP, unless you have UR, right? AP is just going to have penetration. There's a lot of enemies usually on the map on Chapter 15, so AP is just going to be more beneficial. CLs, you're generally going to use HP++. Weapons are crafted through Gear Lab. If you have the URPR guns, you use those, right? Like the Plymouth gun, right? You'll use that if you have enough to equip, right? Because you might have a battleship like Bismarck's Way that might want to take it instead. Or maybe your boss fleet might want to take it, but you'll put it on your shields if you can, or use HP++. There's several different guns you can craft, like the Bell Gun Kai, the Seattle gun. I think the Normal Parliament gun's back in the Gear Lab now as well. So you should be fine, as long as you just kind of give them one of those guns. DDs would generally take HE type guns. I don't know why I'm clicking on. Yeah, you'll generally take HE type guns. If you have the URDD gun, you'll obviously opt for that. There are some cases you could take the AP gun, the KMS AP gun, against medium armor, specifically if you're running a DD or having a DD secondary slot for like the boss nodes. That's what you would probably do against a medium armor boss. Okay. So now we're gonna move over to auxiliaries. So the auxiliaries for CBs, CAs, and CLs, you generally want to stick with washer machines, torpedo boats, and potentially the AA radar, only if you're bringing a ship that has like really bad AA, right? It's just to help them reduce the AA damage they're taking. That's all it is. It's usually some CAs, right? Generally, this is more of like a faction fleeting thing. This is our specific waifu, and like that usually is like a CA that's mostly damage oriented. They help bring a little bit more damage, but they just won't survive. They're just gonna take too much damage. They'll get hit by torpedoes and everything like that. This is just to help them survive a bit longer. But it's completely optional. You can still probably stick with washing machines, torpedo boats, and be generally fine. This is if your composition doesn't have enough AA coverage, that one CA might just be taking too much damage, right? Or CBs. Well, you don't really want to take on the CBs, but like, you could, in theory, and it could work, but it all depends on just how much AA coverage you have. Now, your CLs and DDs, though, can take rainbow torps or ASW gear, but it all depends on if you have your AA coverage and survivability handled. If you have enough AA and you have enough survivability, yeah, you can opt to take more damage. There are a lot of people during the first week or two who are running it down with DDs and seals with like double Rainbow Torp, and we're able to like squeeze by, so it's completely possible and fine. You're probably gonna have to take a lot stronger DDs, at least SSR ones, in order to like push through and make it. Now, there's the Hedgehog. It's a very, very powerful anti-sub weapon. You're going to want to put that on your strongest ASW ship. It's probably going to be a DD or CL, depending who you're taking, but you want to make sure they have it, right? It's going to be really, really important they have it, because those subs, they do a lot of damage, and they spawn on both the top and bottom, and they come rolling in. So sometimes there's 4 of them as well. So your comp might not be able to kill 2 or 1. So yeah. There is auxiliary plane that I mentioned earlier. Let me find a ship that has it. Let me go. Yeah, so here. So these planes right here, they're auxiliary. They also help with ASW. They're really great additions. This way you don't have to, if you're running, you know, one CLDD or double CL, you don't have to make the other CL carry ASW gear. They can choose to have survivability gear, and you can give up the damage for Unicorn for her steam katas, right? You can choose to, like, this is from the event. If you don't have that, you can get these. These are in the core data. So these have depth charges. They also fly out every couple seconds, and they'll target any revealed enemy sub. Like I said, these are in core data. Be careful which one you buy. Make sure you get this one, the Swordfish Mark II ASV, right? Because the other one is not very good, and there's 2 of them. So I don't want you to accidentally waste your core data getting the wrong one. So there's 2 types. Make sure you get this one. Now, for subs, for the auxiliary, even though I know I said they weren't that important, what I did was I chose to opt for snorkel and high pressure. My strategy was to basically keep them underwater as long as possible, so I can make use of them just continuously hitting the enemy and weakening the enemy. That is what I did. You can opt to take rainbow dildos if you can keep them alive when they resurface and back away. They do take a few seconds, I think it's like 5 or 6 seconds to like surface and back away. During that period, the enemy might be sending a ton of planes, or there might be a lot of crash damage from suicide boats, or maybe enemy battleships are shelling your vanguard, right? And they just get in a crossfire. Like, they could just instantly die. Subs are not very tanky. They die pretty quick. So I tried to basically make sure they stay underwater as long as possible for like 40 seconds, and I would summon them usually 10-20 seconds into a fight. I waited until at least the first second packs are like there or like partially killed, and they would come in and they'll help finish out the final pack, soften up and weaken them. So so those are things I would recommend. Now, anti-air gear, right? Now we can look at anti-gear. So in anti-air gear, oh, sorry. Let me just. So for anti-air gear, I'm sorry I'm not like clicking around showing everything I've been drinking, and I'm pretty scuffed. But anti-air gear, so there is anti-air min-maxing you can do. Even with the comps I have, there is. Like, I'm fortunate enough where I basically have all plus 13 sexy buffers and IG and URAA guns, a few of those. So I don't really have to AA min-max as much. If you don't have a bunch of plus 13 AA gear, and you have to use plus 10, you might have to AA min-max. It's not too hard. Like, I'm not an expert. I'm not going to get too deep into it, but the rule of thumb is that you have to balance AA guns that have better range and speed on weaker AA ships. And then you use your higher DPS, higher flat damage performing AA guns on strong AA ships. Yeah, like the ones that have really high stats and efficiencies. So that's generally what you want to do. They usually call them like accelerators and extenders on weaker ones, and then you have your hard hitters on your strong A. It's decently simple. There is like a deeper min-max to it. Like, the key thing is as long as you're killing the planes, right? Like, if you notice that you're barely like not able to kill some of the planes as they're clipping away, then maybe you might need more range, maybe more speed, whatever it is. You might have to fiddle with it a little bit, but that's generally the rule of thumb, right? Okay, so now we can just go into like the boss nodes. I think we've already basically talked about enemy nodes, the CO nodes, BB nodes, CV nodes, and I think I explained it decently well on how to handle those nodes. So we could talk about the boss nodes. So in 15.1, the bosses are Chitose and Chiyoda. They're medium armor, right? So pretty straightforward. You bring AP guns. In 15.1, it's not too hard of a stage. You should be able to beat it. If you can't, then you have to fiddle around on your account. If you can't, you may not just be able to beat it yet. You'll have to go get more optimal ships, or you'll have to rebalance your compositions with other optimal ships, or you're simply gonna have to collect more better gear and upgrade and bring it, right? It is kind of like the check on if you understand the mechanics of the stage and if you're actually using appropriate gear. That's what that check is. But it's not too hard. The boss is just medium armor, and you just slap them with medium, like AP guns basically. So 15.2 is a little interesting because there's Issei and Hyuga. They're heavy armor, right? So you could opt to bring aim torps there. You could opt to, but you might have to have a slow, so it might not be worth it. Since it's Issei and Hyuga, they are battleships, and if your backline is reviewed, they will instantly end your backline. Like if your flagship is reviewed during their attack phase, they will 100-0 your flagship, like no problem. So depending on how your composition is set up, you might have to figure that out. You might have to adjust your timings, you might have to use faster or slower weapons, or you might have to bring certain ships in the boss fleet that have flagship protection. Like Hamen 2, for example, has a flagship protection that reduces flagship damage taken, or maybe you bring Musashi if you have to, and you try to get your side ships or flagship to take the damage. Musashi reduces it, so you'll have to come up with something to deal with it if that's the case. Not only is it just Issei and Hyuga, BB nodes are like this as well. If you get unlucky and your timings are off, the BB nodes, the threat 3, they will target down your flagship and completely delete it. So you gotta watch out for that. You might have to reset a fight if you have to, or you might have to play manual and withhold your attacks until their attack phase on your Vanguard is done while you dodge the shells. Now in 15.3, there's Zuiho. You're gonna have to fight her twice, right? You may have to run your mob fleet into her if your boss fleet is not as powerful to handle both the fights, because there's a debuff you get whenever you fight a boss node, and you basically have to fight the boss with the other fleet to kind of like remove it. So it can be a little tricky. Zuiho, I believe she's medium armor. She's not in the game as of now, but since I believe she's a CVL, so she should be medium armor. You would just use AP guns. Don't be fooled to bring torpedo bombers or rocket planes. In 15.1, I forgot to mention, in theory, you could also bring rocket planes or torpedoes, bombers, but wait, I messed up. I meant to say rocket planes, not torpedo bombers earlier. You could bring rocket planes in 15.1, but you don't want to bring in 15.3. It's usually too hard. There are going to be very, very few compositions that are going to be able to make use of rocket planes in 15.3 for the boss fleet. It's possible, but not for a lot of comps. If you're not using a lot of min-maxy optimal ship choices, so it's not recommended. So avoid seeing as medium armor and you bring AP rockets. Don't do it. Just stick to dealing with anti-air, strong anti-air bursts, fighters and stuff like that. And if you do have to fight one of the nodes using your mob fleet, you may have to opt for having more preload healers and healers to keep your mob fleet alive longer, so they have a bigger HP pool. But that'll just have to come from your experimenting and testing what you have available on your account. Okay, now 15.4. So you're gonna fight Zuikaku twice, and you're gonna fight Hatsuki and Wakatsuki twice. So in this instance, basically the first fight is gonna be Zuikaku. You'll send your boss fleet to fight it. Heavy armor. I don't recommend using aim torps. It's possible to use it, but I don't recommend aim torps. You're probably going to want to bring interceptors just because if you don't have enough AA for some reason, you're going to have to fiddle around with your Vanguard to get enough AA, but then that weakens your overall survivability because a lot of AA carries sometimes are not like the strongest ships, and there's a lot of other types of damage that happens too, like torpedoes and shelling and things like that. So it can get kind of rough. It can get really, really rough. So you generally just want to stick to intercepts for any of your carriers. And obviously, heavy armor, you just bring any guns that are going to be your best against heavy armor. For the light armor, Hatsuki and Wakatsuki, you're going to bring HE. This is where your mob fleet can benefit from using HE damage. This is why Breast, I mentioned earlier, is actually pretty good as a mobber. She can, be an off healer, and she has a lot of inherent HE damage. You can give her HE gun, and she's gonna be really exceptional for this. If you don't, there are other choices like Azuma you can use as well. But overall, you do want to kind of bring HE damage to make sure you can kill him pretty easily. And if you don't kill him quick, you're gonna have to have enough ASWs to deal with all the subs that will be spawning, because there'll be quite a few. You can opt to bring more gunboats instead of ships that have torpedo. Having a secondary gun to help spray them down a lot quicker too as well. And that's basically kind of like the rundown. Here's a few ships I'll recommend. They're just options. You definitely, like I said, the flexibility is quite wide. It's really up to you and what you have available on your account to use whatever you want. If you want a faction fleet, if you want to use your waifus, or if you want to try to min-max whatever you have on your account, it will take some experimentation. But like I said, I hope everything I've been saying to help you guide through, you can use whatever's on your account to try and get through it. Like Cheshire is usable, 15-1, 15-2. She's really great. She does struggle beyond that and does kind of have to get carried for other things. Harbin is really, really good. I already mentioned Noshiro. Montpelier, technically, with the augment, is not too bad. Albion, I think I mentioned for support carrier, but if you had no choice, you can use it. And obviously Haman too. There's just a few. There's quite a few more. And yeah, I think that's basically the guide. I forgot to add in a bunch of other stuff. I'm Yummy Chips. I'm on Twitch. I stream on Twitch. Yummy Chips. No, twitch.tv. Wait. Huh? What is it? Like twitch.tv/yummychips_. There's an underscore. If I was actual proper YouTuber, there'd be like a little thing that says, hey, this is my thing. But that's where I am. I'm not verified, so I can't post links. Yeah, that's about it. So good luck. I hope this helped you. If it didn't, that's fine. Feel free to leave comments, like, subscribe, comment about maybe what you used, what you did, and if there's anything wrong, feel free to add in more. It's always great to hear more information and input. So you guys, thanks for watching. Take care.